The phone rang like a funeral bell. It was her, Grace, my daughter-in-law. Her voice cut through the receiver like a poison dagger. "If you want to be part of Christmas, come clean the house," she shouted, with that arrogance I knew so well. "I refuse to be your servant, Helen. If you want to be with your son and your grandchildren, you'll be here tomorrow morning with the cleaning supplies." I closed my eyes. My living room felt as silent as an empty church. The afternoon light filtered through the lace curtains, creating golden shadows on the furniture I had chosen with so much love decades ago. Everything was immaculate. Everything shined, because I, Helen Martin, 72 years old, have never lived in filth. "Did you hear me?" she kept screeching. "Mark agrees. He says it's time you contributed something useful instead of just criticizing." My heart plummeted, like a building collapsing in slow motion. Mark, my son, my only son. The boy I held in my arms for entire nights when he had a fever. The young man I applauded at every graduation. The man I hugged on his wedding day, believing he had found a good woman. "Besides," Grace continued, "this year, dinner is at our new house, the one we bought without your help, by the way. So if you want to see the kids open their presents, you know what to do." Her words hit me like stones against glass. See my grandchildren, those beautiful creatures who carried my blood, who ran to me shouting, "Grandma," every time they saw me. Now they were conditioning my presence on me becoming their housekeeper. "So," she insisted, "are you coming to clean? Or do you prefer to stay alone in your shabby little house watching soap operas?" Shabby little house. As if this home where I raised my son as a single mother, where I worked double shifts to give him everything he needed, was something to despise. As if these walls, which held decades of love and sacrifice, were worthless. "Enjoy yourselves," I replied with a calmness that surprised even me. "What did you say?" "I said enjoy yourselves. Have a beautiful Christmas." And I hung up. The silence that followed was deafening. I sat in my favorite armchair, the green velvet one that had been my mother's, holding the phone as if it were a sacred relic. My hands were trembling slightly, but not from fear. It was something different. It was determination crystallizing in my veins like burning ice. I walked to the window. The garden stretched out before me like a perfect postcard. The roses I had planted with my own hands, the small stone path Mark had helped build when he was 12, the fountain where the birds came to drink every morning. Everything was in its place. Everything except me and the life of my own family. I went to my desk. I opened the top drawer and took out a cream-colored folder that had been waiting there for weeks. Inside, the plane tickets shined like golden promises. Destination: a private island, St. Bart's, Caribbean. Date: tomorrow. Yes, tomorrow. While they waited for me to show up with cleaning supplies, I would be boarding a plane to paradise. While Grace wondered where her free maid was, I would be toasting with French champagne under the palm trees. I had booked this suite 2 months ago after the last humiliation, when they told me I couldn't have an opinion on my grandchildren's education because I was out of touch. When they forbade me from bringing them gifts because I spoiled them too much. When they made me feel like a stranger in my own family. But they didn't know something I had kept secret for years. The savings, the investments, the money I had saved working until I was 68, living simply denying myself luxuries, all waiting for the perfect moment. And that moment had arrived. I picked up my phone and dialed the travel agency. "Mrs. Martin," the sweet voice of Caroline answered. "Everything is ready for your trip tomorrow." "Completely ready," I replied, feeling a genuine smile spread across my lips for the first time in months. "And Caroline, make sure the professional photographer is available. I want the best photos of my life." Morning arrived like a golden caress on my skin. I woke up in the most luxurious suite at the resort, with the sound of the waves kissing the white sand like celestial music. The air smelled like jasmine and freedom. For the first time in years, I hadn't woken up thinking about the needs of others, the constant demands, the silent reproaches. I looked in the marble bathroom mirror. The woman looking back had bright eyes, 72 years old, and finally, I looked radiant. The coral dress I had bought especially for this trip fit perfectly. It highlighted the golden tan, already starting to form on my skin. Breakfast was served on my private terrace. Tropical fruits. I had never tasted coffee that tasted like glory fresh-baked bread that melted in my mouth like butter. As I ate, I thought about Grace. Surely she was waiting for me with the cleaning supplies, watching the clock, wondering where her free maid was. "Excuse me, Mrs. Martin," a soft voice interrupted. It was Marcus, the resort's professional photographer, a charming young man with a genuine smile. "Are you ready for the photo shoot?" "More than ready," I replied, feeling an excitement I thought was lost forever. For the next few hours, I became the star of my own movie. Photos on the beach with the sun creating a golden halo around my figure. Photos in the infinity pool with the ocean stretching to the horizon like an eternal promise. Photos in the gourmet restaurant toasting with champagne that cost more than Grace's monthly budget. Every click of the camera was a declaration of independence. Every pose was an act of rebellion against years of making myself small, of accepting scraps, of allowing them to treat me like old, burdensome furniture. "You have incredible energy," Marcus said, reviewing the photos on his camera. "You can tell you're living your best moment." "I am," I replied, surprised at how confident my voice sounded. "I am being reborn." As Marcus captured my image in different scenarios, my mind traveled to the exact moment it all went wrong. It had been 2 years ago, at a seemingly normal family dinner. Mark had announced that Grace was pregnant with their 3rd child. I had jumped with excitement, hugging them, offering to help with everything. "That won't be necessary, Helen," Grace had said with that fake smile I already knew. "My mother is coming to help. She actually understands how to raise modern children." The stab had been direct to the heart. Mark hadn't said anything. He just looked down like he always did when his wife humiliated me. My silence had made me an accomplice to my own destruction. "Mrs. Martin," Marcus pulled me from my thoughts, "could we take some photos on the private yacht? The captain says the sunset will be spectacular from the sea." "Of course," I replied, feeling the adrenaline of revenge run through my veins like golden honey. The yacht was a floating work of art, polished wood glass decks interiors that looked straight out of a luxury magazine. As we sailed through crystal clear waters, Marcus snapped photo after photo, me posing on the bow, the wind moving my silver hair like silk, me toasting with rosé champagne as the sun reflected in my glass like liquid diamonds. "These photos are going to be sensational," Marcus murmured, clearly impressed. "You're celebrating something special." "My independence," I replied without hesitation. "After 72 years, I'm finally learning I don't need anyone's approval to be happy." In the afternoon, while enjoying a massage with aromatic oils at the spa, my mind continued to unravel the threads of the past. I remembered every humiliation, every exclusion, every moment they made me feel invisible, the Christmases where I arrived with gifts and was received with long faces, the birthdays where my presence seemed to be more of a bother than a joy. I especially remembered last year when my grandchildren were in a school play. I found out by accident when I overheard Mark on the phone with his mother-in-law inviting her. They didn't even mention it to me. I arrived as a surprise and saw how Grace's mother occupied the seat of honor in the front row while I had to stand in the back. After the play, when I went to congratulate my grandchildren, Sophie told me something that broke my soul. "Grandma, why do you never come to our important events?" I didn't know what to say. I couldn't tell her that her mother deliberately excluded me. I couldn't poison her innocent heart with the bitter truth. The masseuse worked the knots of tension in my shoulders as I remembered the last straw. It had been a month ago when Mark had called me to borrow money. "It's for Grace's car, Mom. Hers broke down and she needs a new one to take the kids to school." I had agreed immediately. I transferred the money without questions, without conditions, as I had always done. But 2 days later I saw photos on Grace's social media of the new car, a brand new luxury BMW that cost 3 times what I had loaned. They had used my money as part of the down payment, but they had made me believe it was for something basic and necessary. That was the final betrayal. They didn't just lie to me. They underestimated me, believing I was too stupid to find out the truth. The sun was setting when I returned to my suite. The photos had already been edited and transferred to my phone. They were works of art. I was the star of everyone. Radiant, elegant, happy. A woman who had decided to write her own ending instead of letting others dictate it. I opened my social media app for the first time in months. I had practically abandoned my profiles, using them only to see photos of my grandchildren that Grace shared when she wanted to show off as a perfect mother. I uploaded the first photo, me on the beach, the coral dress flowing in the wind, my silver hair shining in the sun, a genuine smile lighting up my face. The caption was simple but powerful. "When life closes, doors build your own palace. Christmas in paradise." I posted it. My heart was beating like a war drum. The first likes started to come in, like raindrops at first, then like a torrent. Friends I hadn't seen in years, neighbors, old work colleagues, everyone commenting on how radiant I looked, how happy, how elegant. "Helen, you look beautiful. You're living your best life. You are an inspiration." But I was waiting for other reactions, the ones that really mattered. I uploaded the second photo an hour later. Me on the yacht toasting with champagne, the sunset painting the sky in golden and purple hues behind me. My smile was pure satisfaction. The caption read, "Toasting to second chances and new beginnings. When you close a toxic chapter, life gives you blank pages to write your own happiness." My phone vibrated. A private message. It was from Brenda, my older sister who lived in another city. "Helen, where on earth are you? Mark called me hysterical asking for you. He said you were supposed to go clean Grace's house for Christmas dinner and you never showed up." I replied immediately. "I'm where I should have been years ago, Brenda, taking care of myself. But the kids, what will they think when you're not at Christmas?" "They will think whatever Grace tells them to think, like always." There was a long pause before her next message. "Helen, there's something you need to know. Something I've been meaning to tell you." My heart sped up. "What? Last year when they were invited to your grandson's graduation and you weren't? Mark told me you had been very busy with your own things and preferred not to go. I thought it was strange, but I didn't want to interfere. Now seeing these photos, I realize they've been lying to me too." The puzzle pieces began to fit with crystalline clarity. They hadn't just excluded me, they had manipulated the information so other family members would believe I was the one pulling away. "Brenda," I wrote with trembling fingers, "how many times did they tell you I didn't want to go to family events?" "Many, Helen, many." And like an idiot, I believed them. "I thought you had become bitter after Dad died. Forgive me." I closed my eyes. The manipulation ran deeper than I imagined. Grace hadn't just settled for turning Mark and the kids against me. She had woven a web of lies to isolate me completely, making my own family believe I was the one to blame for my absence. I uploaded the third photo. Me in the resort's infinity pool, a tropical cocktail in hand, surrounded by absolute luxury. This time the message was more direct. "They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but I prefer to serve it with champagne and an ocean view. For all those who thought I was easy to trample on, here is your answer." My phone exploded. The first message was from Henry, my lifelong neighbor. "Helen, you look beautiful. Are you in the Caribbean? I'm so glad you're enjoying yourself." I replied, "Thank you, Henry. I'm finally learning to value myself. You deserve it. You were always too good to everyone. By the way, did you know Mark stopped by your house this morning? He seemed very upset. He was pounding on the door like crazy, yelling your name." The image of my son, desperate looking for me. It gave me a strange mix of satisfaction and pain. Satisfaction because he finally understood he needed me. Pain because he had realized it too late, very late. Messages kept coming. Rosa, the housekeeper who had worked for me for years before retiring, wrote to me, "Mrs. Helen, what joy to see you so radiant. I always knew you were pure gold. God bless you in that paradise." Rosa, she truly knew me. She had witnessed my sacrifices, my sleepless nights, all the times I stayed up caring for Mark when he was a child. She had seen how I worked double shifts to give him the best education, how I denied myself things so he could have everything he needed. "Rosa, my dear," I replied, "thank you for always being loyal. You know better than anyone what I gave for my family." "I know, ma'am. And I also know how badly they've treated you. I've seen how that woman talks to you when she thinks no one is listening. You don't deserve that mistreatment." Those words were like balm to my wounded soul. Someone else had seen it. I wasn't crazy. I hadn't imagined the slights. I uploaded the fourth photo. Me dining at the most exclusive restaurant in the resort with lobster and caviar surrounded by absolute elegance. The message was devastating. "Christmas Eve dinner in paradise. Thanks to everyone who taught me I deserve so much more than what they offered. Sometimes the best lessons come from the worst teachers." And then it happened. What I had been waiting for. My phone rang. It was Mark. I didn't answer. It rang again. I let it ring. A third time. Silence. A text message arrived. "Mom, please answer. Where are you? Grace is hysterical. The kids are asking for you. Please come home." I didn't respond. Another message. "Mom, I know you're upset, but it's Christmas. The family should be together. The family should be together." What irony. Now that I wasn't available to be their doormat, suddenly they remembered we were family. Another message. "I saw your photos. They look incredible. How did you pay for such a luxurious trip?" There it was, the real question. They weren't worried about my emotional well-being. They wanted to know where the money had come from, because in their minds, I was the poor old woman who depended on their occasional charity. I finally decided to reply. "Mark, the question isn't how I paid for this trip. The question is why it took me so long to realize I deserved it. Mom, I don't understand. Please explain what's happening. What's happening, my son, is that your mother got tired of being treated like a servant in her own family. What's happening is that I decided to celebrate Christmas with someone who truly values me, myself. There was a long pause. But the kids, Mom, they need you. The kids need a grandmother who respects herself, Mark, not one who accepts scraps out of pity. My phone began to ring frantically. Call after call. Mark. Unknown number. Mark again. Mark. Another unknown number. I didn't answer any of them. The messages multiplied like a virus. Mark begging, Grace furious from friends' phones, distant relatives asking what was going on. But I was at peace. For the first time in years, I was exactly where I wanted to be, doing exactly what I wanted to do without asking anyone for permission. I uploaded the 5th photo, me dancing salsa with a resort instructor laughing like I hadn't laughed in decades. The message was blunt. Life begins when you decide to stop living for others and start living for yourself. At 72, I'm finally learning to dance to my own rhythm. My phone showed 23 missed calls, and the night was just beginning. The dawn of the second day arrived with the constant sound of my phone vibrating on the marble nightstand. It was 5 a.m. in the Caribbean, which meant it was 6 a.m. back home. The perfect time for the day after Christmas family panic. I got up slowly, savoring every second of freedom I felt in my bones. The sunrise painted the ocean in shades of pink and orange. It was the second day of my new life, and my phone already showed 56 missed calls. 56. I laughed to myself on my suite's terrace. 56 desperate calls from a family that had ignored me for years. The irony was delicious, like the Jamaican coffee I was drinking. I opened the messages. There were over 100. Mark, Grace from borrowed numbers, relatives I hadn't spoken to in months, all wanting to know where I was, what I was doing, how I dared to ruin the family Christmas. The first one I read was from Mark, sent at 3 a.m. Mom, Grace didn't sleep all night. She's devastated. She says she never meant to hurt you. Please call us. Devastated. Of course she was devastated. Her perfect plan had crumbled. Her free maid had flown the coop, and now she had to face the consequences of years of manipulation. The second message was more revealing. The kids are asking for you nonstop. Sophie cried all night asking if you had died. Please at least tell them you're okay. There it was. The real pain. My grandchildren, those innocent little ones who had been used as emotional weapons against me, now suffering because their mother had completely underestimated their grandmother. But I wasn't going to give in. Not this time. I uploaded my 6th photo, me at breakfast with a table full of exotic fruits, natural juices, and a spectacular ocean view. My smile was serene, powerful. The message I wrote was calculatedly calm. Good morning from paradise. Nothing better than waking up without the sound of reproaches, demands, or manipulations. Peace has an exquisite flavor. The comments exploded immediately, friends applauding me, strangers inspired by my story, and among them, like thorns among roses, angry comments from accounts I recognized as Grace's friends. How selfish, abandoning her family on Christmas. The grandchildren must be devastated. A real grandmother would never do this. Each negative comment made me smile more because it confirmed my message had hit its target. Grace was so desperate she had recruited her friends to attack me on social media. My phone rang again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. I decided to answer. Helen. It was the voice of an older woman trembling. It's Norma, Grace's mother. Norma. The famous, perfect mother-in-law who always knew how to raise children better than I did. The woman who had taken my place at every important event for my grandchildren. Hello, Norma, I replied with icy calm. Helen, please, you have to come back. Grace is devastated. The children don't understand why their grandmother abandoned them on Christmas. Abandoned. The word dripped from my mouth like sweet poison. Norma, did Grace ever tell you she conditioned my presence at Christmas dinner on me cleaning her house? Silence. Did she tell you that for 3 years she has systematically excluded me from important family events? More silence. Did she tell you she told my grandchildren my gifts were inappropriate because they made them feel bad? Helen, I didn't know. Of course you didn't know, Norma, because your daughter is an expert at showing one face and hiding the other. But don't worry, you don't have to worry about me anymore. Apparently, you are the grandmother they need. I hung up. My heart was pounding, but not from nerves. It was pure adrenaline. For the first time in years, I had said exactly what I thought with no filter, no consideration for others' feelings. I uploaded my 7th photo, me getting a massage on the beach, completely relaxed with the sea in the background and an expression of absolute peace. letting go of decades of accumulated tension. It turns out that when you stop carrying the emotional weight of others, your back miraculously straightens up. The messages kept pouring in like an avalanche, but among them, new ones began to appear. Messages of support from women who had lived through similar situations. "Helen, you are my hero. My daughter-in-law treats me the same way. How brave. I don't dare confront my family. After seeing your photos, I booked my own trip. I will not tolerate any more disrespect." Without meaning to, I was becoming a symbol for something bigger. Women my age and even younger identified with my story. They had lived the manipulation, the emotional blackmail, the feeling of being taken for granted. Then the message came that changed everything. It was from Henry, my neighbor. "Helen, you need to know something. This morning I saw Mark at your house again, but he wasn't alone. He was with a locksmith. I think they're trying to get in." My blood ran cold. They dared to enter my house without permission. After everything now, they were going to violate my privacy too. I replied immediately. "Henry, please go to my house right now. If they're inside, call the police. I'm on my way. Helen, this isn't right." 20 minutes later, Henry wrote, "They're inside. Mark, Grace, and another man I don't know. They're looking through papers at your desk. I'm calling the police." "Not yet. First, I want to know what they're looking for." My mind was racing. What could they be looking for at my desk? My financial documents? My will? Evidence of how much money I really had? The answer came in Henry's next message. "Helen, they left with a box full of papers. I heard Grace say something about bank accounts, and she can't possibly have that much money saved up." There it was, the naked truth. They weren't worried about my emotional well-being. They didn't care that I had spent Christmas alone in paradise because I had chosen dignity over humiliation. The only thing they cared about was finding out how much money I had and how they could get their hands on it. The fury I felt was volcanic. But it wasn't the blind rage of before. It was calculated, intelligent, surgical fury. I uploaded my 8th photo, me toasting with a glass of champagne from the deck of a yacht at sunset, wearing diamonds borrowed from the resort glittering on my neck. My smile was that of a woman who had discovered her own power. The message was devastating. Toasting to life lesson. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. When they show you 50 times, take a vacation to a private island and reflect on why it took you so long to listen. The phone exploded. Call after call after call. This time I decided to answer. It was Mark. "Mom, where did you get so much money? We found your bank statements." "Hello, Mark," I replied, with a calmness that surprised even me. "Why don't we start by talking about why you broke into my house without permission?" We were worried. We thought something had happened to you." "And that's why you violated my privacy by going through my financial documents." Guilty silence. "Mark, do you know the difference between you and me?" "What?" "When I'm worried about someone, I call them on the phone. When you're worried about someone, you check their bank accounts." "Mom, it's not what you think." "It's exactly what I think, son. And do you know what the saddest part of all this is?" "What?" "That it took me 72 years to realize I had raised a son who sees me as a walking inheritance instead of seeing me as his mother." And I hung up. My phone continued to ring for hours, but I wasn't listening anymore. I was planning my next move, because this was no longer just about a revenge vacation. This was war. The third day dawned with a mental clarity I hadn't felt in decades. As I drank my coffee facing the ocean, my phone rested silently for the first time since this personal revolution began. I had put it on airplane mode overnight. I needed to think without the constant interruptions from my desperate family. When I finally turned it on, there were 127 new messages and 34 missed calls. But this time, among the chaos of pleas and reproaches, there were different messages. Messages that changed everything. The first was from Brenda. "Helen, I have to tell you something important. After our talk yesterday, I called several relatives. Grace's lies run deeper than we imagined." My heart sped up. "What did you find out?" "Remember our cousin Alan's wedding last year? Mark told me you didn't want to go because you were going through a difficult time. I called Alan. I told him you never even received the invitation. He said when he asked Mark about you, Mark told him you said weddings made you sad because of your husband's passing." Every word was like a punch to the gut. They hadn't just isolated me from current events. They had rewritten my emotional history to justify my absence. "There's more, Helen, much more." Brenda had also called Aunt Joan, our mother's younger sister. She says that 2 years ago, Mark called her to tell her you were developing early onset dementia, and that's why you were acting strangely at family gatherings. He asked her not to call you often because you got easily agitated. dementia. They had used the mental illness card to explain any behavior of mine that didn't fit their narrative. If I protested being excluded, it was because I was confused. If I questioned their decisions, it was because I was agitated. Helen, are you there? I'm here, Brenda, just processing the magnitude of this betrayal. I also called Henry. He told me Grace had told several neighbors you were going through severe depression, and that's why you didn't leave the house much, that it was better not to bother you with visits. The web of lies was perfect, systematic, calculated. They had created an alternate version of Helen Martin, an elderly woman, confused, depressed, antisocial, who pulled away from her family due to mental problems. Meanwhile, they appeared as the patient, understanding children bearing the cross of a difficult mother. Brenda, I need you to do something for me. Anything. I want you to organize a family meeting. Everyone you can contact. Aunts, cousins, close neighbors. But don't tell them I'm the one organizing it. Tell them it's to clarify Helen's situation, because you're worried. When tomorrow, at my house, I have to come back. Are you sure? I have never been more sure of anything in my life. I hung up and immediately called the airline. I want to change my return flight to this afternoon. Of course, Mrs. Martin. Any problem with your stay? On the contrary, I replied with a smile that could be felt through the phone. My mission here is complete. As I packed my things, I uploaded my 9th photo. Me in the resort lobby, bags packed, dressed elegantly in an emerald green suit I had bought at the hotel boutique. My expression was serene, but determined. Paradise was beautiful, but some battles must be fought at home. When you have the truth on your side, no battlefield is intimidating. The comments were immediate and divided. My new followers cheered me on. Go get them, Helen, show them who you really are. But panic messages from my family also arrived. Mark, Mom, are you coming home? Please, we need to talk. Grace from a friend's phone. Helen, I made mistakes. Give me a chance to explain. I didn't answer any of them. They were right to be nervous. I was coming back, but not as the submissive Helen who had left. I was returning as a woman who had rediscovered her worth, and that terrified them. The flight back was meditative. As the clouds stretched out beneath me like white cotton, I mentally reviewed every piece of evidence I had gathered. I didn't just have proof of their current manipulation. I now had a complete map of years of systematic lies. I landed at 8 p.m. Henry was waiting for me at the airport as we had arranged. Helen, he hugged me tight. You look incredible, radiant. I feel reborn, Henry. During the drive home, he updated me on everything. Mark and Grace have been going to your house every day. I think they're looking for something specific. Yesterday, I saw them bring a lawyer. A lawyer, I repeated. Of course. Probably exploring legal options to access my money, maybe investigating if they could declare me mentally incompetent. Also, Henry continued, I've seen several neighbors asking about you. They're all confused because the stories Mark and Grace told them don't match the photos you posted. We arrived at my house. Everything was exactly as I had left it, but it felt different. It was no longer the refuge of a defeated woman. It was the fortress of a warrior returning victorious from her first battle. That night, as I prepared for the next day's confrontation, I received an unexpected message. It was from Sophie, my eldest granddaughter. She had gotten a friend's phone. Grandma Helen, are you okay? Mom says you're sick and confused, but your photos look so happy. Why didn't you come for Christmas? Did I do something wrong? My heart broke. That innocent child was suffering because she didn't understand the adult war being waged around her. I replied carefully, My love, you did nothing wrong. Grandma is perfectly fine, just learning to value herself more. I love you very much and we will see each other soon. I promise. Promise, promise. But I knew that promise depended on what happened in the next 24 hours. Because I was not going to be part of my grandchildren's lives under the toxic conditions of before. Either things changed radically or my relationship with them would have to be completely different. I uploaded my 10th photo taken from my living room window. It was the familiar view of my garden under the moonlight, but it looked different now through my renewed eyes. Back home. But I am no longer the same woman who left. Tomorrow, some people will find out exactly who Helen Martin is when she stops pretending she doesn't have claws. It was midnight when I finally turned off the phone. Tomorrow would be the most important day of my recent life, the day all the truth would come to light, the day my family would discover they had completely underestimated the woman they thought they had tamed. I went to sleep with a smile on my lips. For the first time in years, I had something to look forward to. The war was about to begin. The morning of the confrontation dawned with a crystalline clarity that seemed to foretell revelations. I woke at 6. I prepared myself with the same care as a general before battle. I chose an elegant purple dress. I applied my makeup with precision. I styled my silver hair into a perfect bun. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman radiating silent power. At 9, they began to arrive. Brenda was first carrying a folder full of notes from her phone calls. Then Aunt Joan, confused but willing to listen. Henry arrived with his wife Mary, both with serious expressions. One by one, they filled my living room. Cousins I hadn't seen in months. Close neighbors, even Mrs. Lazaro from the end of the block. "Does anyone know why we're here?" asked Cousin Alan, clearly uncomfortable. "We are here," I replied from the entryway where I had been watching, "because it's time you knew the truth." All heads turned towards me. There were murmurs of surprised comments on how good I looked, how radiant, how different. "Helen," Aunt Joan said, rising to hug me, "it's so good to see you. Mark had told us—" "What exactly had Mark told you?" I interrupted her softly. "Well, that you were going through a difficult time, that you preferred to be alone." "Interesting." I walked to the center of the room. "Does anyone else have similar versions of my recent mental state?" Glances began to be exchanged. Cousin Paul raised his hand timidly. "He told me you had early-onset dementia. And you, Alan, that you had developed severe depression after Uncle's death. Mrs. Lazaro, that you had become antisocial and didn't want visitors." Each answer was like a piece of evidence presented to a jury. The expressions in the room began to change from confusion to gradual understanding. "Very interesting," I murmured, pacing the room like a seasoned prosecutor. "So according to my son and daughter-in-law, I am an elderly woman with dementia, depression, antisocial tendencies, and who systematically rejects important family events." Brenda stood up. "Helen, tell them what really happened." "Oh, no," I replied with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "First, I want them to get here." As if summoned by my words, the doorbell rang. Henry peeked through the window. "It's Mark. He's with Grace. And that is a lawyer." "Perfect." My voice was pure satisfaction. "Let them in." Henry opened the door. Mark entered first, followed by Grace, who looked pale and nervous, and a man in a suit who was clearly the lawyer. When they saw the room full of relatives and neighbors, they stopped dead in their tracks. What is this?" Mark stammered. "This, my dear son, is what's called an intervention, but not for me, for you." Grace clung to Mark's arm. The lawyer murmured something about, "Perhaps it's better to return later." "No," I said firmly. "Stay. Especially you, Mr. Lawyer. You're going to want to hear this." I moved to the center of the room where everyone could see me clearly. The morning light filtered through the windows, creating an almost spotlight effect on me. "For the last 3 years, I began, my voice clear and strong. My family has painted me to all of you as a woman who is mentally unstable, depressed, antisocial, and difficult. They have justified my absence from family events by saying I was the one rejecting the invitations." All eyes turned to Mark and Grace, who looked like they wanted to disappear. "The truth," I continued, "is that for these 3 years I have been systematically excluded, manipulated, and humiliated. The truth is that 3 days ago my daughter-in-law called to demand that I come and clean her house if I wanted to participate in Christmas dinner." There were shocked gasps in the room. "Brenda," I said, turning to my sister, "could you share what you discovered yesterday?" Brenda stood up, opening her folder. Mark told Cousin Alan that Helen had rejected the invitation to his wedding because weddings made her sad. Alan confirmed to me that Helen never received an invitation at all. "That's a lie," Mark shouted. Is it also a lie?" I interrupted, "that you broke into my house without permission to go through my financial documents?" The silence was deafening. The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. "Henry," I continued, "could you confirm what you saw?" Henry stood up. "I saw Mark, Grace, and this gentleman entering Helen's house with a locksmith. I saw them leave with a box full of papers. I heard Grace mention bank accounts." "We were worried," Grace finally shouted. "We thought something had happened to you. Were you worried about my well-being?" I replied in a glacial voice. "Or were you worried about finding out how much money I have?" The question hung in the air like a bomb about to explode. "Because you see," I continued, addressing the whole room, "it turns out their concern wasn't for my mental or emotional health. Their concern was that a 72-year-old woman had managed to save for decades, working until she was 68, living modestly, investing wisely, and they believed they had the right to manage that money." Aunt Joan stood up. "Helen, are you saying they've been lying to all of us about your mental state to justify isolating you?" "Not just that," I replied. "Rosa, the housekeeper who worked with me for years, could you repeat what you told me about what you observed?" Rosa cleared her throat. I worked in this house for 15 years. I saw how Mrs. Helen raised Mark alone, working double shifts, sacrificing to give him the best education. And in recent years, I've seen how that woman," she pointed at Grace, "talks to Mrs. Helen when she thinks no one is listening. She treats her like a servant, not like her husband's mother." "That's not true," Grace protested. "Is it not true that you told me if I wanted to be part of Christmas, I had to come clean your house?" Grace turned bright red. "I just wanted you to contribute." "Contribute? Like when I loaned you money for the basic car for the kids, and then I saw on your social media that you had bought a luxury BMW." The lawyer stepped closer to Mark and whispered something in his ear. Mark shook his head, clearly agitated. "Mr. Lawyer," I addressed him directly, "may I ask what exactly you were hired for?" The man looked extremely uncomfortable. Consultation on mental capacity and estate management." "Ah," my smile was fierce. "Mental capacity. You wanted to declare me incompetent to manage my own resources." "No, Mom," Mark yelled. "We just wanted to make sure you were protected." "Protected?" My voice rose for the first time. "Protected from whom, Mark? From my own ability to make decisions, from my right to choose how to spend my money, from my right to say no when I am treated like trash." Tears began to roll down my cheeks, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of liberated fury, of years of broken silence, of reclaimed dignity. "Look at these photos." I took out my phone and showed the pictures from the Caribbean. "This is me, a 72-year-old woman who decided to spend her money on her vacation after her family treated her like a domestic employee." The room was in absolute silence. "And look at this." I showed the bank statements that Mark had photographed when he violated my privacy. 50 years of honest work. Disciplined, saving, smart investments. All mine. All earned with my effort. The lawyer moved towards the door. I believe there is no case to defend here." "Don't go yet," I said firmly, "because now I'm going to need your services for something completely different." The lawyer stopped dead, turning to me with an expression of curiosity and fear. The entire room held its breath, waiting for my next move. Mark and Grace looked like cornered animals finally exposed before the entire family. "Sir," I began realizing I didn't know his name. "Mr. Mendoza," he replied nervously. "Mr. Mendoza, do you have experience in cases of defamation, psychological manipulation, and breaking and entering?" His eyes widened. "Yes, ma'am, but..." "Perfect. Because I'm going to need to sue my son and daughter-in-law for moral damages, systematic defamation, and for breaking into my home." "Mom, you can't be serious." Mark stepped forward, desperate. "I can't." My voice was tempered steel. "Mark, for 3 years, you have painted me as a woman with dementia to our relatives. For 3 years, you have justified my exclusion. You have used my name to create a false narrative that damages my reputation and my dignity." I walked directly towards him, and for the first time in years, I saw real fear in his eyes. This wasn't the fear of a son worried about his elderly mother. This was the fear of a man who knew he had been caught in his lies. "And 4 days ago," I continued, "you violated my home, went through my private documents, and photographed my financial information without my consent. That, Mr. Lawyer, is that legal?" "Absolutely not," Mendoza replied, looking at Mark with reproach. "That constitutes breaking and entering in violation of financial privacy." "But we're family," Grace whimpered. "We just wanted to make sure she was okay." "Family." The word came out of my mouth like pure venom. "Grace, do you know the difference between family and strangers?" She shook her head, tears starting to flow. "Strangers don't have access to your heart to destroy it. Strangers don't know your weaknesses to use them against you. Strangers can't make you believe that love comes with humiliating conditions." Brenda approached me, putting a hand on my shoulder. "Helen, tell them about the grandchildren." "Ah, yes, the final blow. My grandchildren," I said, looking directly at Grace. "They were used as emotional weapons against me. Remember when Sophie told me she couldn't accept my gift because it made them feel bad? Remember when you told them Grandma was sick and that's why she didn't visit?" Mark collapsed into the nearest armchair, covering his face with his hands. "Those children," I continued, my voice breaking but firm, "love their grandmother. But they have been manipulated to believe their grandmother rejects them, that she is mentally ill, that it's better to keep their distance." "Mrs. Martin," Mrs. Lazaro intervened from her corner, "the children only know what their parents have told them, that their grandmother is problematic, difficult, that she's going through things. They've grown up watching their parents talk about me with pity and frustration, as if I were a burden." Henry stood up. "Helen, I can testify that those kids look for you constantly. Every time they come to visit and you're not here, they ask for you." The oldest one, Sebastian. Sebastian asked me 2 weeks ago if his grandma was angry with them because she didn't visit like she used to. My heart broke all over again. My grandchildren thought it was their fault. They thought they had done something to push their grandmother away. Mr. Mendoza, I addressed the lawyer again. I want to be very clear. I am not doing this for money. I have more than enough money. I am doing this for justice, for dignity, and to make sure this never happens to another elderly woman in this family again. I understand, ma'am. And I also want to modify my will immediately. Mark's head snapped up. What? My current will leaves my entire estate divided between Mark and his children. That is going to change. Mom, please. Silence! I roared with a force that surprised everyone, including me. 72 years I waited to scream like that. 72 years being the polite, understanding woman who always gave in. 72 years swallowing humiliations because family is the most important thing. The echo of my voice bounced off the walls. No one moved. No one breathed. But family, I continued, my voice calmer, but no less intense, is not who shares your blood. Family is who respects you, values you, includes you, and loves you without humiliating conditions. I walked to the window where the morning light illuminated my garden, the same garden where Mark had played as a child, where he had run through the roses, where he had learned to ride a bike. All those beautiful memories now contaminated by years of betrayal. My new will, I announced without turning around, will establish a trust fund for my grandchildren's education administered by a bank. They will receive money for university, for medical emergencies, for their true needs, but none of it will pass through their parents' hands. And the rest? Brenda asked softly. The rest will go to a foundation that helps elderly women who suffer emotional abuse and family manipulation. Women who are isolated, slandered, and made to feel invisible by their own families. Grace let out a sob. Helen, please. I made terrible mistakes, but I can change. We can fix this. I turned to face her. For the first time in years, I truly saw her, not as the enemy I had built in my mind, but as a young, frightened woman who had made horrible decisions out of insecurity and greed. Grace, I said calmly, do you know what your biggest mistake was? She shook her head, crying. It wasn't treating me badly. It wasn't manipulating Mark against me. It wasn't isolating me from my family. I waited, letting the suspense fill the room. Your biggest mistake was completely underestimating who you were messing with. You thought I was a harmless, dependent old woman who would tolerate anything just not to lose her family. You thought you could rewrite my history, control my narrative, manipulate my reputation. I walked towards her slowly. But what you didn't know is that Helen Martin didn't get to 72 by being weak. I got here by being strategic. And when a strategic woman decides she will no longer tolerate humiliation, she becomes the most dangerous force in the universe. The silence that followed was absolute. Mr. Mendoza, I said finally, when can we begin the legal proceedings? Immediately if you wish. I wish. Mark stood up, staggering. Mom, give me a chance to fix this. Please, think of the children. The children, I replied, are exactly who I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about what example I want to set for them about how elderly women should be treated. I'm thinking about teaching them that grandmothers are not servants, not walking bank accounts, not annoying responsibilities. I am thinking, I continued, about showing them that a woman can defend herself at any age, that it is never too late to demand respect, that dignity is not negotiated for crumbs of family affection. Brenda applauded slowly, then Henry, then Aunt Joan. One by one, all those present began to applaud. The sound filled my living room, my house, my heart. It was the sound of justice. It was the sound of a woman who had recovered her voice after years of silence. It was the sound of Helen Martin reborn from her own ashes. The applause gradually faded, leaving a thick silence that seemed to vibrate with the energy of all that had just been revealed. Mark remained seated, his face in his hands, while Grace cried silently in a corner. Mr. Mendoza was taking notes, furiously clearly recalculating the entire situation. Now, I said, addressing the whole room, I want you to understand something important. This is not the end of a family. This is the end of a toxic dynamic that was destroying this family. I walked to the center of the room where everyone could see me clearly. Mark, I said softly, look at me. My son slowly raised his head. His eyes were red swollen. In them I saw the child he had been, the young man I had raised with so much love. But I also saw the man who had allowed his wife to destroy our relationship. Do you know when you started to lose me? I asked him. He shook his head. When you stopped seeing me as your mother and started seeing me as a problem to solve. When my emotions became inconvenient for your comfort. When my needs became obstacles to your plans. I never wanted," he stammered. "You never wanted to hurt me, I know. But there is a difference between intention and impact. Mark, your intention might have been to keep the peace in your marriage, but the impact was that your mother felt invisible in her own family." Brenda stepped closer. "Helen, what are you going to do about the grandchildren?" That was the question that hurt the most to answer. My grandchildren. Those little ones who had been manipulated to believe horrible things about their grandmother, who had grown up watching their parents treat me like a burden, like something inconvenient to be tolerated. "The grandchildren," I replied slowly, "are going to need time to understand the truth. They are going to need therapy to undo years of false narratives, and they are going to need parents who are capable of admitting their mistakes and working to repair them." I looked directly at Mark and Grace. "If you are willing to do that work, if you are willing to go to family therapy to admit to the children that you lied about their grandmother, to rebuild this relationship from a place of total honesty, then we can talk about a future. And if not," Mark asked in a broken voice, "if not, the grandchildren will have a grandmother who loves them from a distance, who left a trust fund to ensure their future, and who taught them by her example that it is never too late to defend yourself from abuse, even when it comes from family." Grace approached timidly. "Helen, I know what I did was unforgivable. I know it took years before I realized how horrible I was being. But when I saw those photos of you in the Caribbean, when I saw how happy you looked without us," her voice broke, "I realized that you weren't the problem. The problem was me. I was so afraid of not being enough for Mark, so afraid he loved you more than me, that I decided to eliminate you from the equation." It was the first time I had heard her admit the real truth. No excuses, no justifications. The raw truth. "Go on," I encouraged her. "I was jealous, Helen. I always was. Jealous of how Mark talks about you, how he admires you, how he loves you. When I was younger, I thought I could compete with you, but the more I tried to win, the more I realized a mother isn't something you compete against. She's someone you share." Genuine tears ran down her cheeks. But by the time I realized that I had already done so much damage, I didn't know how to go back. Every lie needed another lie. Every exclusion needed a justification. Every humiliation needed an excuse. "And the children," she added, her voice cracking, "I used them to hurt you, because I knew that was the only thing that would truly break your heart." The silence that followed was heavy laden with years of finally acknowledged pain. "Grace," I said after a long pause, "your honesty is a first step, but first steps don't erase years of damage." "I know. Are you willing to go to therapy, to work on understanding why you needed to destroy another woman to feel secure, to admit to your children that you lied to them about their grandmother?" "Yes," she replied without hesitation, "whatever it takes." "And you, Mark," my son stood up slowly. "Mom, I knew. Not all of it, but I knew something was wrong. I knew Grace exaggerated when she talked about you. I knew some of her stories didn't add up, but it was easier to believe her than to face the truth." "What truth?" "That I had married someone who was capable of manipulating and hurting my own mother. That I had chosen my marital comfort over the dignity of the woman who gave me life." His words hit me like shockwaves. It was the most honest admission I had heard from him in years. "Mark, why did you let it get to this point?" "Because I'm a coward, Mom. Because it was always easier to let you absorb the abuse than to confront Grace. Because I knew you would love me no matter what. While with her, I constantly had to keep the peace. And now I understand that I lost my mother because I was afraid of losing my wife. And in the end, I almost lost you both." Henry cleared his throat. "Helen, what do you need from us?" "I need witnesses," I replied. "I need the truth to be known by everyone. I need that when someone asks about Helen Martin, the answer isn't the poor lady with dementia, but the woman who refused to be trampled on." Aunt Joan stood up. "We'll do it. We will all speak to whoever is necessary. And I need time," I continued. "I need time to decide if I can forgive. I need time to heal. I need time to rebuild my relationship with my grandchildren without the toxic interference that has existed." "How much time?" Mark asked. "As long as it takes. It could be months. It could be years. It depends on you and the real work you are willing to do." Mr. Mendoza closed his notebook. "Mrs. Martin, do you want to proceed with the lawsuits?" I thought for a moment. Legal revenge would be satisfying, but was it what I truly needed? "Mr. Mendoza, I am going to make the lawsuits conditional on meeting certain requirements, which are, Mark and Grace must go to family therapy immediately. They must have an honest conversation with the children about the lies they told them about their grandmother. They must make a public acknowledgement to the family that they slandered my character, and they must respect my space and my time until I decide if I want to rebuild this relationship. And if they comply with all of that, If they comply, and if I see real sustained changes, then we can talk about forgiveness. But if they fail on any of these points, we will proceed with the full force of the law." Mark nodded vigorously. "We'll do it all, Mom. Everything." "Don't tell me," I replied firmly. "Tell your children when you explain to them why their grandmother wasn't at Christmas." I walked to the window once more. The sun was high now, bathing my garden in a golden light that made everything look renewed, fresh, full of possibility. "There is one more thing," I said without turning around. "What?" Mark and Grace asked in unison. "The next time you want to know about my money, my plans, or my mental state, you ask me directly. The next time you have a problem with me, we resolve it face to face. No intermediaries, no manipulation, no lies." "I promise," Grace whispered. "Because," I continued, turning to face the whole room, "Helen Martin is no longer the silent woman who tolerates everything. Helen Martin is a woman who knows her value, who demands respect, and who does not accept less than what she deserves." The applause that followed was different from the last one. This wasn't just support, it was recognition. It was the sound of a family that had just witnessed the rebirth of its matriarch. It was the sound of a woman who had reclaimed not just her voice, but her throne. 6 months later, I was sitting on the terrace of my new house, a beautiful property I had bought on the outskirts of the city. It wasn't an escape, it was a choice. A place where I could start over, surrounded by gardens I had designed myself, with a view of the mountains I had always loved. Family therapy had begun the week after our confrontation. I had insisted on separate sessions first. Mark and Grace working on their marriage and understanding the roots of their behavior, while I worked with a therapist specializing in family emotional abuse. I had needed time to process decades of subtle manipulation, to understand how I had allowed my self-esteem to be eroded so gradually that I almost didn't notice. "Grandma Helen," I heard Sophie's sweet voice behind me. I turned, and there she was with Sebastian and little Matthew, accompanied by Mark. It was their third visit to my new house, and each time it felt more natural, more genuine. "My loves," I said, opening my arms. They ran to me, but with a noticeable difference. The strange tension that existed before was gone, that feeling that they had to watch their words around Grandma. Their parents had finally told them the truth, adapted for their ages, about the mistakes they had made. "Look, Grandma," Sebastian said, showing me a drawing. "I drew you at your new house. See, here are your flowers." The drawing brought tears to my eyes. It was me smiling, surrounded by bright colors, with a beautiful house behind me. It was how he saw me now, happy, free, at peace. "It's beautiful, my love. Can I hang it on my refrigerator?" "Yes. And look, Grandma, I don't have to ask Mommy if I can accept your gifts anymore." Sophie had grown so much in these months. The honesty from her parents, though painful at first, had freed the children from carrying guilt that was never theirs. Mark approached timidly. "Mom, can we talk?" I nodded, gesturing to the chairs on the terrace, as the children ran to explore the garden. "How are the sessions?" I asked. "Difficult," he admitted. "Very difficult, but necessary. The therapist has helped me understand that, at some point, I stopped seeing you as my mother and started seeing you as a responsibility, as something that had to be managed." It hurt to hear it, but I needed to hear it. The truth, however painful, was the only foundation on which we could rebuild. And Grace, she's working hard on herself. She's been writing you a letter for weeks. She rewrites it over and over because she says nothing she puts down feels like enough. I don't need perfect apologies, Mark. I need consistent action. I know, and you're seeing them. The children know the truth. We've contacted all of the relatives to clear up the lies. Grace even spoke to the neighbors to explain that what she had said about your depression was false. It was true. Over these months, I had received calls and visits from family and friends who wanted to apologize for believing the false narrative. Some were genuinely sorry. Others were simply curious about the family drama, but they all knew the truth now. "Do you know what hurt the most?" I asked Mark. "What? It wasn't the lies. It wasn't even the exclusion. It was that you completely underestimated who I am. You believed I was so weak, so dependent, so needy of your approval that I would tolerate anything." Mark looked down. "You're right. We never recognized your strength. We only saw what was convenient for us to see. And now, I see the woman who raised me alone working double shifts. I see the woman who rose from poverty through hard work and intelligence. I see the woman who at 72 was able to plan a revenge so perfect it left us all speechless." For the first time in months, I smiled genuinely at Mark. That revenge wasn't just for you. It was for me, to remind me who I really am. "Grandma," Sophie ran towards us. Is it true you have a foundation to help other grandmas? It's true, my love. During these months, I had officially established the Helen Martin Foundation for Elderly Women. It was small, but it had already helped 15 women in situations similar to mine. Women who had been isolated, manipulated, and made to feel invisible by their own families. Can I help when I grow up? Of course you can. Mark looked at me with genuine admiration. Mom, what you've built in these months. I'm proud of you. Thank you, son. But I didn't do it to make others proud. I did it because I finally understood that my value doesn't depend on anyone else's approval. That afternoon, after Mark and the children left, I received an unexpected visit. Grace was at my door, alone, with a letter in her hands and tears in her eyes. Helen, she said when I opened the door, can I talk to you? I invited her in. She looked different, thinner but also more serene. The therapy was changing her. That was evident. I brought this, she said, holding out the letter. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I needed you to have it. I took the letter but didn't open it right away. How are you, Grace? Destroyed, she answered honestly, but also relieved. For the first time in years, I don't have to hold up all those lies. I don't have to pretend I was the victim of a difficult mother-in-law. I can admit that I was the one who caused this disaster. Why did you come today? Because in therapy, I've been working on something called active amends. It's not enough to acknowledge the harm. You have to do something to repair it. She sat on the edge of the sofa as if she didn't feel she had the right to be comfortable. I've been volunteering at a center for older women, helping with activities, listening to their stories. And in every woman I meet, I see what I did to you. I see the damage a toxic daughter-in-law can cause. And what have you learned? That older women are not obstacles to young marriages. They are sources of wisdom we should be honoring, not destroying. That a mother-in-law isn't competition. She's a gift. And I wasted years of a relationship that could have been beautiful because of my own insecurities. I opened the letter. It was long handwritten, filled with specific acknowledgments of every single harm she had caused. But what struck me most was the end. Helen, I'm not asking for forgiveness because I know I don't deserve it yet. I am asking for the opportunity to spend the rest of my life proving I can be different. I'm asking for the opportunity for my children to see how a woman can recognize her mistakes and work to change. I'm asking for the opportunity to honor the incredible woman you are instead of trying to diminish you. I folded the letter carefully. Grace, do you know the difference between repentance and guilt? No. Guilt is a feeling that paralyzes you. It makes you feel bad about yourself, but it doesn't necessarily motivate you to change. Repentance, on the other hand, is action. It's the commitment to do things differently. Which one do you think I'm feeling? I think you are transitioning from one to the other, and that is a good thing. We sat in silence for a few minutes, watching the sun set behind the mountains. Helen, she said finally, do you think someday we can have a real relationship? Not just civil for the kids, but real. I believe, I replied carefully, that authentic relationships are built on truth, respect, and consistency over time. If you can demonstrate those three things consistently, then yes, we can build something real. How long? As long as it takes. There's no rush, Grace. Strong relationships aren't built in weeks or months. They're built in years. When she left that night, I stayed on my terrace late looking at the stars. For the first time in years, the future felt full of possibilities instead of burdens. My phone vibrated. It was a message from a woman named Linda, 68 years old, who had contacted my foundation. Mrs. Martin, your story gave me the courage to confront my family about how they treat me. I'm meeting my children tomorrow. Could you call me before I need to hear your voice to feel strong? I smiled in the darkness. This was my purpose now. I hadn't just reclaimed my own dignity. I was helping other women reclaim theirs. I replied, of course, Linda. I will call you early tomorrow. Remember, your value doesn't depend on others recognizing it. It depends on you recognizing it. As I prepared for sleep in my beautiful new home, I thought about the entire journey, from that humiliating call from Grace to this moment of peace and purpose. It hadn't been easy. I had cried. I had doubted. I had been afraid of losing my family forever, but I had learned something fundamental. It is better to be alone with dignity than accompanied by humiliation. And the most beautiful part of all, I didn't have to choose. I had reclaimed my dignity, and slowly my family was learning to love me in the way I always deserved. Before I closed my eyes, I whispered a phrase that had become my mantra. Legacy isn't a monument. It's a map. My legacy wasn't going to be a tomb full of silent sacrifices and crushed dignity. It was going to be a map for other women, showing them that it's never too late to fight back, to demand respect, to write a different ending. At 72, Helen Martin had discovered that life doesn't end when you decide to stop living for others. Life begins